If the Earth suddenly grew 1,300 times larger, the universe as we know it would not simply change. It would collapse into an entirely new reality, as if existence itself had forgotten its original form. The ground beneath every being would no longer be familiar. Mountains would rise like vast continents beyond imagination, and oceans would stretch into endless dark blue realms, where even light would hesitate to travel. Gravity, that silent force holding all things together, would deepen its grip. Every step would feel heavier, as if the world itself were asking all life to surrender to its expanded will. Cities would become tiny scattered sparks on an unfathomable surface, and nations would lose meaning, dissolving into vast distances that no traveler could ever fully cross within a lifetime. In such a world, even the sky would feel different. Clouds would drift over colossal landscapes so wide that storms would take weeks to pass from one horizon to another. Weather would no longer be a daily experience, but a long evolving journey of forces stretching across continents, the size of worlds. The oceans, multiplied in scale, would hide deeper mysteries than any human mind could imagine. Pressure so intense in their depths that entire new forms of matter might exist there. Time itself would feel slower, not because it changed, but because everything would take longer to reach, to witness, to understand. Human life, as it is known, would struggle to adapt. Communication between distant places might become nearly impossible without advanced technology, as even light signals would take far longer to travel across this expanded globe. Civilizations would either fragment into isolated worlds or evolve into highly connected systems bound by invisible networks. The idea of home would shrink to a fragile concept, while the planet itself becomes an overwhelming, boundless presence. And yet, within such overwhelming scale, there would also be a strange kind of awakening. Humans might begin to see themselves differently, not as rulers of a planet, but as small observers within a vast living system. The expanded Earth would humble all illusions of control. It would teach, silently and without words, that size does not create importance, and that even the smallest point of awareness can hold infinite meaning within a boundless world. Massive expansion of scale. If Earth became 1,300 times larger, landscapes, oceans, and continents would expand beyond human imagination, making the planet feel almost limitless. If Earth were suddenly expanded to 1,300 times its current size, the first and most overwhelming transformation would be the sheer collapse of familiar scale. What we now call continents would no longer resemble the landmasses we recognize. Instead, they would stretch into unimaginable superregions, where a single mountain range could extend farther than entire countries combined. Rivers would no longer feel like simple flowing waters, but like endless, winding forces carving paths across vast planetary surfaces that no human could ever hope to fully witness in a lifetime. The horizon itself would lose meaning, as every direction would reveal more distance, more land, more unknown space beyond comprehension. Even familiar places would become unrecognizable. A city that once took an hour to cross might shrink into a barely visible dot on a colossal terrain. Maps would become nearly useless, not because they lack detail, but because the scale of Earth would exceed the limits of human perception and measurement. Entire regions would exist in relative isolation, separated not just by distance, but by the overwhelming effort required to traverse such space. This expansion would also reshape the emotional relationship humans have with their world. The sense of near and far would dissolve, replaced by an endless awareness of space itself. Exploration would no longer be a simple journey, it would become a lifelong commitment. In this vastness, Earth would no longer feel like a home that is easily known, but a boundless, living mystery that can only ever be partially understood. Stronger and heavier gravity effects. Gravity would intensify, making movement harder and increasing physical strain on all living beings and structures. With Earth expanded to 1,300 times its original size, gravity would become one of the most immediate and dramatic forces reshaping existence. The planet's increased mass would likely intensify gravitational pull across its surface, meaning everything from human movement to the behavior of oceans and atmosphere would change fundamentally. Walking would no longer feel natural or effortless. Even standing upright could require greater energy and adaptation. Human bodies, evolved for a specific gravitational balance, might struggle to function under the heavier conditions, leading to widespread biological stress and forcing rapid technological or evolutionary adjustment. Structures that once stood strong buildings, bridges, and entire cities would need to be reimagined to withstand increased weight and pressure. Engineering would face a new reality, where every design must account for stronger downward force and greater structural strain. Even materials considered durable today might fail under the amplified demands of this expanded world. On a planetary scale, oceans would press harder into the crust, potentially deepening trenches and reshaping coastlines. Atmospheric layers might compress differently, affecting weather patterns, wind behavior, and even temperature distribution. Flying would become more difficult, as aircraft would require significantly more power to overcome stronger gravitational resistance. In such a world, life itself would be defined by adaptation. Every organism, system, and civilization would need to adjust to a planet that feels heavier, more demanding, and far less forgiving. Earth would no longer be a gentle cradle of life, but a powerful force that constantly tests the limits of survival and innovation. Extreme distance and isolation, cities and regions would become so far apart that travel and communication would be extremely difficult, leading to isolation of civilizations. If Earth expanded to 1,300 times its current size, distance would become the greatest barrier separating all forms of life. What once felt like a few hours of travel could stretch into journeys, lasting months or even years. Entire civilizations would begin to exist as isolated islands of humanity, separated by vast, unbroken stretches of land, desert, forest, and mountain that no ordinary travel could easily overcome. The idea of visiting another city casually would fade into something closer to an expedition than a routine trip. Communication would also be transformed. Signals traveling across such enormous distances would take far longer to reach their destination, even at the speed of light, creating delays that would reshape politics, trade, and human connection. Cultures would develop independently, influenced only by their immediate surroundings, leading to greater diversity, but also deeper separation between societies. Even exploration would take on a new meaning. Mapping the planet would no longer be a task of years but of generations, with entire regions remaining unknown for centuries. Travelers would need advanced technology, careful planning, and immense resources just to cross what we now consider normal distances. Emotionally, humanity would feel the weight of separation in a profound way. Relationships across regions would weaken, and a sense of global unity might fade unless maintained through strong technological networks. In this expanded world, distance would not just be physical. It would become a defining force, shaping identity, culture, and survival itself. Slow and vast natural processes, weather systems, storms, and ocean dynamics would operate on a much larger and slower scale, with events lasting much longer across huge distances. In an Earth enlarged by 1,300 times, weather and natural systems would no longer behave in the familiar cycles humanity understands today. The atmosphere would stretch over unimaginable distances, allowing storms to form, grow, and persist in ways that could span vast regions for weeks, or even months. A single hurricane might not be a compact event anymore, but a slow-moving planetary force reshaping entire continents as it travels. Rainfall patterns would become uneven and unpredictable, as clouds drift across enormous skies before releasing their burden far from where they were formed. Oceans would also transform into deeper and more complex systems. Currents would flow across immense basins, taking far longer to complete their cycles. Temperature differences between regions would intensify, creating extreme weather zones where heat and cold interact on a massive scale. Deep within these expanded oceans, pressure would reach extraordinary levels, possibly giving rise to unknown chemical reactions or even entirely new forms of matter and life adapted to extreme environments. Seasons themselves would feel different. A change in climate in one region might take years to fully influence another, making Earth's environmental rhythms slow and difficult to predict. Humans would no longer experience weather as a daily or seasonal pattern, but as long unfolding events that shape entire generations. In such a world, nature would feel less like a background system and more like a vast, living presence. Every storm, every shift in wind or ocean would carry the weight of a planet operating on a scale far beyond human immediacy. Shift in human perspective, humanity would feel smaller and more humbled, leading to a deeper realization of nature's vastness and a reduced sense of control over the planet. If Earth expanded to 1,300 times its size, humanity would not only face physical challenges, but also a profound psychological transformation in how it perceives existence. The sense of control that humans currently feel over their environment would begin to dissolve. Standing on such an immense world, people would realize that even the most advanced civilizations occupy only a microscopic fraction of a vast planetary surface. This realization would bring both humility and awe. As the illusion of dominance over nature fades into a deeper awareness of scale, societies would likely evolve in different directions. Some might retreat into tightly connected technological hubs, relying on advanced systems to maintain communication and survival across enormous distances. Others might become more localized, developing independent cultures shaped entirely by their immediate surroundings, with little connection to distant regions. Over time, this could lead to a fragmented yet richly diverse human civilization, where identity is shaped more by environment than global unity. At the same time, exploration would take on a spiritual quality. Traveling across the planet would no longer be routine. It would feel like entering unknown worlds. Every journey would demand courage, preparation, and endurance, turning exploration into a deeply meaningful act rather than simple movement. Ultimately, humanity would be forced to redefine what it means to exist on a planet so vast. Earth would no longer feel like a familiar home, but a boundless living realm that continuously challenges perception, resilience, and imagination at every level.